Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel for yet another special. So many of them. Although this is the end of international break, so may not be one for a while. But we are gonna do stats, and more stats today. But don't worry, it's not going to be really boring and just a load of numbers because we'll talk about how they're going to work and which ones we should pay attention to, which ones we should not. This is not my wheelhouse, so I have enlisted the help of the other half of the Blades Pod. We had Ben on a few weeks back. So I would like to welcome at Blades Analytic on Twitter, who you should all follow. Jay, how you doing?
I'm very good. Ben's definitely the better half for anyone tuning in. So
Is he?
he must be. He surely is. He's the more creative half. I'm the more geek. So
Yeah, but in a midfield too, you need balance, don't you? You need your Alex Tetty with your Morris Leitner or your John Fleck with your Ollie Norwood, don't you? So there you go.
I like that. That's a great little comparison.
There we go. Tell us a bit about the Twitter account and the podcast first of all before we start.
Yeah. So the podcast kind of came from the Twitter account, really. I started the Twitter account just under my own name originally, back well in the day now, about 2 years ago, and I just kind of spoke about kind of tactical things about Sheffield United, things I thought I saw, and it kind of gained some traction. And then I started putting out some data kind of things, just how many shots we took in a game, who created the most chances, that type of thing, really. And from there, it really gained some traction and grew organically. And then I kind of just contacted Ben. I'd heard his podcast and all 5 followers that we had at the time each. And we decided that I would do a pod with him. And it kind of caught fire a little bit. People kind of liked Ben's pods are great. He presents them well and he talks about good things, but they kind of added my data in there and all of a sudden it took off. And from there it's grown. And now I cover the Championship, League One, League Two, kind of work remotely for a club as well on some data analysis. So it's just grown organically, really. But it's more from people's interest. It's nothing to do with me. I'm just tweeting out things that a lot of people are, but people seem to be interested, growing ever increasingly in this. So.
Absolutely. Just quickly, obviously, as a complete neutral when it comes to Sheffield United, I would recommend the podcast for non-Sheffield United fans, really, and I think some of it is, one, because Ben's very balanced, but two, I think, is because of the stats stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's United focused, but we always look at our upcoming opposition, their kind of form. We'll get into it later, but the kind of underlying metrics behind their form. We reviewed the Championship as a whole. I think a funny one you might like, Ben. We were about 10 games in, and we made some predictions based on data. And at the time, Ipswich were actually looking okay on data, so I was kind of predicting Ipswich to move up the table as my long shot, which obviously turned around. But that's the data; it can go either way. But yeah, it's we cover kind of everything, really. So whenever it's a generic episode, I always tweet it out to anyone, really, and say, just zoom in. We always put Ben's really good. He puts the time lapses at what we're discussing at each time, so you can kind of skip a bit of the United bit. But we like to think we're quite balanced. We try.
What I would say about that Paul Hurst stat is the data was correct at the time.
Correct. Yeah.
That's your ultimate get out on that. Why do you love stats so much? How did you get into that side, or was it just through the Twitter account?
No. So I studied performance analysis at university. So that was kind of where I kind of got a love for you get the video analysis side of it, which is what everyone knows goes on in football. But alongside of that kind of comes the notational analysis and the stats overview. So we look at obviously running stats, at clubs and athletic type stats. But then you look at a little bit deeper and how are people affecting the game? What is their contribution to the game and their role? And then I went and coached and played football in America for 2 years. And everything is so statsy out there. I grew to love the NFL.
NFL
the
has always
NBA.
been that way, hasn't it?
It's weird. The NFL is, but to be honest, hockey is the number one.
Really?
Hockey is, anything good that's in football statistic world now that we'll get onto, the kind of expected goals, it came from hockey. A lot of things came from basketball as well. There's actually some basketballs who now work in football. Recruitment clubs and things, so that they are kind of interlinked, not the sports themselves, but the processes that you go through. And it's just when you're in that American culture of stats, you kind of think, okay, I can see where this relates. And then, you kind of read into it and it starts to throw up players who might not necessarily get credit, but who, when you look deep into it, you think, wow, this guy's really affecting his team. He's really coming up good in the numbers. And I just found it interesting, basically, from there, which I think a lot of people do.
So is that Moneyball movie accurate? Because that's on Netflix, and that might be a good start for people if they are interested.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, that's based on a true story.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it's actually a book that was wrote by Michael Lewis in the States. So for anyone who hasn't seen the film, go see it. It's one of Brad Pitt's better films, if that helps. It's also got Jonah Hill in, but not in a comedy front. But it's really good. So in essence, it looks back at a time in baseball where football was maybe 5 years ago. Traditional scouts, basically old guys in tracksuits, went around the country finding what they thought to their eye was the best player. And there is a case in point for that still being good. No one's saying that's not a good way of doing it, but the Oakland Athletics at the time, they were a side who had no money compared to the New York Yankees, the Boston Red Sox, these kind of big names, the Man United and Man Cities, if you will. And they thought about it, and a very clever guy there called Billy Beane, who is actually one of the owners of Barnsley Football Club now. Billy Beane actually said, we need to look at things in a different way. We can't go for the same players the Yankees can because they'll just pay them more. And they started to deep dive into some statistical analysis. And I won't get into the boring bits, but they made some new metrics that weren't existed before. And in essence, they went on a 22-game unbeaten run. They nearly won championships, World Series, so the Premier League, if you will. They won that, and they are equivalent to the side of Burnley's kind of size. I think that would be fair. So obviously we had the miracle of Leicester, and we'll get into that if you want. That was done on some statistical recruitment. So it kind of shows it was effective. And since that time now, everyone in baseball uses it. The owners of the Red Sox at the time were actually the owners of Liverpool now, which kind of goes a lot to how Liverpool have gone in the last 5 years as well.
Interesting. Very, very interesting stuff. So look, just to give this a bit of context, I did a small amount of research. As I say, this is not my wheelhouse, but in the most black and white sense, you can sum up football by saying who scores most wins, and whoever wins most is the best.
Yeah.
And we could stop the interview there, but we both know that it's far, far more nuanced than that. We started off basically, the only metrics were league tables, weren't they? Goal difference got added onto them in 1975, 3 points for a win in 1981. I may be wrong about this, but the first advanced metric, and you'll laugh at this being an advanced metric, was shots being counted. And I mean, I only really go back to Italian 90. I think anyone of my age will remember the little dashes coming down the side with the flags, and you'd see which team had most shots. And that's kind of where it started, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure the YouTube comments will correct me if I'm wrong anyway. Talk to me about shooting stats. First, in terms of teams, and then we'll talk about players. And I have in front of me the championship team stats. So if you want to talk a bit about what we should be looking for in terms of shooting, and then I'll give you some info from the championship this season.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, a good place to start is why do we look beyond goals? So often, anything that I post out on Twitter is always caveated by some fans, and they're fair to say it because I used to say this myself. Yeah, but all that matters is the league table, right? Or all that matters is the 1-0 win, right? That's fair enough in that moment. However, football is a game of numerous passes, countless shots, but very few goals. So in terms of what actually makes up a team that wins, they need to score goals. How do they score goals is where kind of statisticians started with. Now, you can take goals on their own, but there's not enough of them. There's not enough big sample size. So what you actually want to look Yeah, basically. So what you actually want to look at is shots. There's a hell of a lot more shots per game. So how do we create shots which then create goals? That's where it kind of came from. Obviously, what you want in shots is you want to take a lot of shots and you want to not give away a lot of shots. Goes without saying. However, as years have rolled by, we've kind of got to a point where the saying is very famous now, not all shots are created equal. What that means in essence is I could quite easily take 10 shots from outside the box, but they don't really carry the same threat that your 2 shots inside the box do. So
Hold
that's
that
where we
thought
kind
for
of
when we
start.
talk about Derby County in a minute, yeah?
Yeah, I guess that's normally one. Derby fans don't like me at the minute. That's a good one. It's amazing the narrative that teams don't like. So I'm a Blade, clearly, as passionate as they come. And earlier in the season, Sheffield Wednesday, we'll get on to what metric, but they were struggling in a certain metric, shall we say. And I was conveying that on Twitter, and the abuse I received was quite funny. Because
Don't start me this week because I did my team of the year and didn't put Emi
okay.
Buendia in it. So
Oh dear.
I died a death this week on YouTube. So sorry, continue.
No, that's difficult though, right? Picking 11 players from that many players is hard, isn't it? But it's it's interesting because shot data is the first real time I saw statistics. That's what I kind of loved to begin with. And what shot metrics do is it allows you to move into projecting performance. So not just looking at what's happened, looking at what might happen. If a team in 10 games, for example, wins the shot count, if you will, they take more shots than their opposition. It's not scientific, it's not fact, it's not a full 100%, but the odds are they're going to do better long term if they continue that form. Whereas if a team is based on fourth in the league, but in those 10 games they lost a shot battle in every single game, so they took less shots than their opposition, the odds are that's not going to continue. They're not going to pick those points up for the rest of the season. There's more nuance to that nowadays, and you can break it down further, but that's kind of where it started from. There was a guy called James Grayson who created a shot metric, and basically this looked at shots on target, I won't say the sum, but in essence a bit of an algorithm involving shots on target and shots against. And that was a metric that worked out to be about 85% accurate in terms of projecting future performance. So that's where the kind of data came from. It wasn't just looking at what's been, it's looking at what might come.
Interesting. And if Ipswich fans are listening to this, they will remember Ipswich had a 5-game winning streak at the start of last season where they lost the shot count in every game. And obviously, like if you want an outlier stats guy, Mick McCarthy is your guy to just confuse the hell out of everybody. But yeah, we've had this all last season. So look, listen, going into the Championship, most shots per game. Leeds, followed by Brentford, followed by Norwich. Leeds and Norwich are in the top 3, but Brentford we might have to just dip into because they're amazing when it comes to stats a bit later. Most shots on target per game. Norwich again, Brentford again, who are 13th, I think. Yeah, 13th. And Leeds again. Most shots outside the box. So remember, this is a Derby team with Tom Lawrence and Harry Wilson in. Derby, Brentford again, and Leeds. Most shots inside the 6-yard box. You'll be pleased with this one because it's Sheffield United, and I'm so pleased this one's in here. Followed by Millwall, and I think you and I both know why. Followed by Villa. Most shots inside the penalty box. Leeds, Norwich, and Mr. Pookie, and Middlesbrough, which baffled me. Can you just talk to me about a few things? Obviously, it would stand to reason that Leeds, Norwich, and Sheffield United would have more shots than everybody because they're better teams. They have the ball more, and therefore they're at the top of the table. Just talk to me about Brentford, who seem to be killer on these stats, but not in the top 6. Talk to me about Millwall, Jake Cooper, and throw-ins, and just kind of summarise about how this all kind of looks with this season in mind.
So I'm not going to do Sheffield United because I'm obviously a Sheffield United fan, but there's an interesting one on Sheffield United there that you said. I'll get onto that afterwards. But Brentford. So Brentford are the darlings of statistics, basically. They do things at that club very different to anyone. And for a club of its size to punch how it does in this league consistently and to bring the players that it does and then sell them on for the profit that it does, it is a model that other clubs higher up the chain are trying to replicate and can't. Brentford have had some very clever people working for them on the stats side. And they've now moulded a team which kind of plays like they want it to, in terms of the fact they create countless opportunities of good quality as well. So those shots aren't just out of the box shots. We'll get onto Derby in a second. But Brentford create good quality shots inside the box, around that 18-yard box. They create really good expected goals numbers. We'll get onto that later as well, I'm sure. But they're a side that create good opportunities. Their problem is actually defensively this year. But they're a lot of guys. They're not the top 20 guys. If you listen to those podcasts, you listen to yourself, Ben, from the times you've spoken about it. They kind of should be higher. I think anyone who looks at the numbers thinks Brentford should be around the top 6. They've kind of just missed some big chances, and also defensively they've been a little bit weak. But attackingly, there's not many better teams in the league really, apart from Brentford. Derby are on the complete converse on that. I'm going to get absolute dog's abuse this, I know, but Derby are just a crazy side. So I think it's fair to say, away from stats, at the start of the season, whenever I watched Derby, I thought they just passed the ball a lot at the back. No real penetration. They just kept the ball, and I've never seen Richard Keogh play so many passes.
Jay, you'd have Tom Huddleston literally between or even behind the centre-backs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Just dropping in the hole there, making a 3 between Tomori and Keogh, and then the ball never went anywhere. And even though they had a good run of form at one point, it just wasn't sustainable. They were basically living off Harry Wilson pot-shotting from 30 yards, either from a free kick or from open play, and it flying in the net, which, listen, Harry Wilson's better than that at most people in the league. It's clearly a talent and a skill, but percentage-wise, so, I've got an example. One of his goals was a 3% chance of going in.
Wow.
On an expected goals model, and it flew in the net. That's not what we call sustainable moving forwards. That's not going to continue because the percentages tell you it's not. And that's Derby's problem. They've now hit that low patch of form where, quite frankly, a lot of observers of the Championship think they won't finish in the top 6 because they don't create the chances that they need to finish there.
Can I put 2 and 2 together, though, and say their manager is famous for scoring tons of goals, from absolutely brilliant players from outside the box. Have they been told to work on shooting from outside the box, or do you think it's just a consequence of who they've got in their 4-2-3-1?
I think it's a bit of it could be, couldn't it? You don't know what's on the inside. I think probably a bit of consequence. I think the fact that they don't really have, especially since Mason Mount got injured, they don't really have a progressive midfielder in the middle who can play the ball in the final third.
Very stodgy,
Wilson's dribbling. Yeah, Wilson's a dribbler and a shooter. Tom Lawrence is a dribbler and a shooter. Craig Bryson's a runner. He's going to run off the ball. Huddleston's going to sit. There's no one who can really have that guile, if you will, in that number 10 role. And that's their problem in reality. And they don't have the style to do that. They've not adapted all season. So I feel like I'm going in on Derby, and I really don't want to. But they are a concept of stats this season. The stats told you from very early on that their performance was going to drop. Their future performance was always going to come down unless they changed what they were doing, and they haven't changed what they've been doing.
Interesting. So Millwall, second most shots inside the 6-yard box. Go ahead.
So I think anyone doesn't need the stats on this one. That's set pieces. Millwall obviously get a lot of set pieces because they play direct and they're exceptionally tall and strong in the aerial situation. What they are also very good at, and the best in the league at, is recycling the ball from set pieces. So if they don't win the first header, they'll make sure they win the second ball and it drops in the penalty box or the 6-yard box. They have the long throws. I think Jake Cooper's got 6 or 7 assists.
People don't mark Jake Cooper now. They don't mark him because they know he's going to... the corner Blades did Aston Villa. They do that all the time, but from a little bit further out. And
that's right, yeah.
People don't mark him. They just, it's just embarrassing, though, that he's scored in the last 3 games against Ipswich as well. Because it's like, we do the previews and we literally know exactly what's going to happen. But sorry, go on.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's an example, really, of both video and statistical analysis. So I know a lot of analysts at clubs, and that is an analyst-type decision that they would say to the coach. Basically, Cooper wins about 60-70% of his aerial duel battles. There's almost no point in directly trying to mark him. You put someone on him, but you let him win the first header and deal with the second ball. And a lot of teams have kind of reacted and tried to do that now. It's the Peter Crouch syndrome. I remember when Sheffield United played Stoke earlier in the season at Bramall Lane. It was a 1-1 draw, and Stoke bought Crouch up late on to try and get a last-minute equaliser. And I think our defenders tried to go and win the ball constantly with him. And as fans, we were just screaming, "Stop! You're not going to win the first header statistically. Just drop off, win the second ball, defend the post." But it's a crazy thing with Millwall. They've got this really weird stats quirk of being able to get a lot of chances in the 6-yard box, but hardly any from open play.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I was at that Sheffield United game as well. Right, individual player shooting now. And I try and want want you to try and help me figure out, what is a good finisher, because I'm particularly interested in Mopai as well, because
Uh-huh.
according to a lot of the stats, he should have scored about 57 goals this season. And there's always an argument. Is a player is Martin Waghorn scoring 16 for a really bad Ipswich team, although taking all the set plays, better than Timu Puki or Billy Sharp scoring 25? Do you know what I mean? So anyway,
Yep, yep.
here's your runners and riders. Most shots per game. Harvey Barnes, we would include him because he's good fun. Mopai and then Kemar Roof. Most shots outside the box, go figure. Harry Wilson, Said Benrahma, Tom Lawrence. Stats don't lie, Derby fans. Most shots inside the 6-yard box, Mopai, Roof, Billy Sharp, obviously. Most shots inside the box, Pookie, Abraham, Roof. So, talk to me about Mopai. Should he score more goals? And try and explain to me about how we can tell who's a good finisher, given some teams are better than others and create better chances.
Oh, I could go on a while on this one.
No, go for it. Go on.
It's a great question, mate. Actually, it's something that a lot of recruitment guys have tried to do for an age. Really define what makes a good finisher. The old Gary Lineker thing of a fox in the box, and it's almost. I mean, we have it a lot with Billy Sharp at Sheffield United. It's almost like a bit of a snobbery, almost like because he scores scrappy tap-ins, that's not good goals. Like that is a skill.
It's not luck.
No, that is, and more with the arrival of a metric called expected goals, which I'll explain in a minute for people who don't know. But with the arrival of XG, more and more that has become a credit, a skill, if you will, to be in the right goal scoring position at the right time. It's now got a label and it's been given credit. So Mopai is a really interesting one. He's one of Brentford's kind of statistical darling type signings. They signed him because what the data said. They got him for an absolute pittance from France, and I think we can all agree they're going to turn a big profit on him when he goes eventually. However, he's a really weird player. He gets a lot of chances in that Brentford team. This year, he scored 17 non-penalty goals. I'll explain what I mean by that. So, as a stats guy, I don't really care if you score penalties. I get that a goal's a goal, but for judging your performance overall in a season and for saying what you might do next, you should score a penalty.
The team wins the penalty, yeah?
Yeah, the stats say 76% of the time a penalty goes in, which is quite high. So, penalties, I take penalties out of goal counts, and I want to look at who's scoring from open play, because that's danger. For me, that's a dangerous player. A lot of players can get 5 or 6 goals from penalties a season. It doesn't mean they're a great goal scorer. So, Maupai's scored 17 non-penalty goals, which is quite good. But he's all scored that from an expected goals total of 21.2. I'll explain what I mean by that. Okay, so expected goals, very simply put, many years ago, some clever people decided to watch about 100,000 shots from any league that you can think of as a big league, the Premier League, La Liga, Serie A. And what they did with these shots is they plotted where they were taken from, angle and distance from goal. So was it straight? Was it, 45 degrees, and the distance as well. Also, what type of shot was it? Was it a header? Was it from a counter-attack? Was it from a cross? Was it from a direct pass? Basically plotted all this kind of geeky type data and took the average from each area. So if you imagine from about the 6-yard box, from an open play pass, it's about an 80% chance of a goal. And what that does is that gives us a value for that shot of 0.8. It's as simple as that. That's just literally what your big companies like Opta, if you've ever seen StatsBomb on Twitter, that's what they do. They basically say, what is the percentage chance of any given shot going into the goal? And that data is taken from millions of shots that these guys have watched.
Do they take into account how the ball is received? All I can think of is Arnold Muren crossing to Marco van Basten. And yes, he's in the box, but he's at an impossible angle and the ball is torso high. Does it take that into account?
Some models do. The more advanced ones certainly do. Most don't.
Okay.
Most judge it on the assist type. So crosses are always less percentage chance of a goal because naturally it's delivered at a faster pace. Normally, like you say, at torso or head height. That's what the averages tell you. But no, you're quite right. There is still some nuance to XG that I've not seen publicly been announced yet. And it's why it's not ever going to be, shall we say, spot on, but it does give a good guidance. And it passes what I call the eye test for me. So when I've watched Morpay's shots and goals, what I see is a player who gets into good positions, but quite frankly can miss sitters at times.
Andy Cole
I
used
think,
to get accused of this, didn't he?
yeah, he'll score a lot of goals, but it takes a lot of chances for him to score a goal. I think that's what it's fair. Was it Ipswich that Morpay missed an absolute sitter against?
It was
that
Cardiff.
This year?
It was Cardiff last
Cardiff,
year, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I can remember that. I just remember the blue kit.
Highly,
but I remember
highly
that.
gifable moment. Look, we'll do a bit more on XG in a minute. I'm just trying to imagine when Maradona receives the ball on halfway with Peter Reid, what the XG. Do you know what I mean? What the XG for that?
None.
For that.
But just to go back to Morpay, before XG, we looked at something called goal conversion. So we talked about how many shots it might take someone to score a goal. So what we can do with that is we can put that in a percentage, basically. So we can say, how many goals have you scored? Divide that by the number of shots you've taken and times it by 100 to give us your conversion rate. So I've got the kind of, as you say, the kind of top strikers in the Championship, Sharp, Pukki, Morpay. I've got their conversion rates in front of me. So this gives you an indicator of how stats developed over time. Conversion was something that was looked at about 5 years ago. So from all his shots and goals this year, Morpay's conversion is just above 18%.
Right.
Put context on that, Teemu Pukki is running at about 23%. Further context, Billy Sharp is running at about 34%.
Wow. It's Sharp top.
Now, yes. Right. Now, Billy Sharp's got one of the highest conversion rates in Europe, if you look at all the players around Europe. And the reason for that is quite simple. Sharp doesn't take a lot of shots. And most of his shots, as you quite rightly said, come from the penalty box, the 6-yard box. Billy Sharp is hardly ever involved, really, in any build-up play or shots around the box. He is on the end of any through ball or cross that Sheffield United do, and that's his game. And he's brilliant at it. But that goes to show that Morpay, he can do a lot. He's a highly technical player. He's good at creating chances for others. He gets in good positions. But he's actually not the greatest finisher.
Interesting. What would someone like Sergio Aguero have as a percentage? Would he still receive more chances and miss more chances?
No, so Sergio Aguero is running about the same as Sharp. Aguero kind of finishes what you give him. He's just a bit below Billy. To put that in context, Messi's about 35% as well overall in his career. So it's kind of, I'm not putting Billy Sharp in that bracket, but I am saying that you know, there is a level of finishing at the top level that Neil Morpay's probably not quite running at yet.
Right.
Pukki's certainly having that type of season where he seems to get chances and converts them at a regular occurrence. Tammy Abraham, 23% as well, so that's one of the highest ones.
Any surprises in there?
I'm just going to look down the list now. So kind of the big names, if you will. Shea Adams running at 23%. So you can see Morpay is below all these guys. Just looking at it there. I kind of say a surprise, not such, but kind of lower end of the scale. Michael Smith at Rotherham has got a 6% conversion rate. It's quite low.
It's not his job, is it, eh?
Yeah. No, he's a target man focal point. Lukas Jutkovic, again, another target man, 11%. I think the interesting one, probably from what we've discussed, so it kind of rolls in, is Lee Gregory at Millwall, who has only got a 14% conversion rate. And he actually does get a fair amount of chances from those knockdowns, from those set pieces. So I think Gregory is one of those, well, again, when we get onto XG, Gregory is one of those that he's a hard-working striker. He brings a lot more than just goals to a game, but finishing is by no means what he is good at.
Interesting. Very, very interesting stuff. Let's talk about possession. In 2008, Spanish deep-line playmaker Pep Guardiola takes over as Barcelona manager, and all of a sudden, the whole world just wants to talk about possession stats. Talk to me about possession and passing. I've got 3 for you in terms of teams. Most possession, that would be percent. Leeds top, Brentford second, and Norwich.
There you go.
Pass completion, and this is a real kick in the face, Swansea. So they're not doing anything with that, are they? Brentford and Villa we would expect with Dean Smith. And key passes, and I'm going to need help with this, Leeds, Brentford, Norwich. So really, Leeds, Brentford and Norwich are the masters of possession. we went through a stage where all the hipsters wanted to talk about possession, and then, as usual with hipster things, then all the hipsters, no, possession, that's rubbish. You don't want
Yeah.
possession. But talk to me about possession and passing, and what the hell is a key pass?
I'll answer that first one last. The key pass depends on who's providing that data. I'm assuming you're on who scored.
Yeah.
Are you on who scored? Yeah. So who scored get their data from Opta, so that's quite easy, which is good. Opta define a key pass as basically a pass which sets up a shot.
Oh, okay.
So it's an assist that doesn't go in,
So
if you
it's
will.
not, for example, I don't know, someone. We use the term break the lines. It's not,
Uh-huh.
for example, because Ipswich have got a really interesting player. You might know about Andre Dazelle, who is
Yes.
not very strong, not quite got it together yet, but has an uncanny ability to play the right pass much better than. And I would have thought that would have been the sort of stat that I could hold up and wave and say, no, look, when he gets the ball, he does the right thing with it. But sorry, go ahead. So key pass ends in a shot.
Yeah, basically. Now you are quite right, and that kind of you're very clever there, Ben. You've basically hit on what football analysts are now trying to do.
Right.
I mean, I can't talk for the top clubs; they are moving beyond this already. But kind of people like myself on Twitter who are out there trying to put the public analysis, if you will, we're trying to get what we call XY data to do exactly that. So it plots where a player starts his pass from, where it ends, and how many players it might bypass. So we're trying to figure out who does those line breaking passes, but that's quite an expensive process to do all that. No, a key pass is just basically a pass that sets up a shot. And again, it's a good statistic, but it's also can be misleading because not all shots are equal. So I could set you up from 35 yards, and player B could set player A up from 10 yards, yet we both get one key pass each. So you can see that the statistics, the old Benjamin Disraeli line, statistics and damn lies, right?
We're talking about the difference between, say, Bryson to Harry Wilson and Buendia perfectly to Pookie, aren't we?
Absolutely. However, there is a stat that does that. Again, we'll move on to that when we come into the more complicated metrics, but there is a stat that looks to measure, should we say, difficulty of passing.
Right, okay.
So there's a stat that's based off XG called expected assist, which tries to work out the percentage increase that you've made with your pass of a goal happening. But just get onto the possession, going back to the original question. Yeah, possession is interesting. Like you say, it was a hipster fad, I think, a few years ago. Let's all play tiki-taka. If we have the ball, the opposition can't. And then Leicester went and won the Premier League with about 37% possession,
and
playing
Cardiff
on the counter-attack.
got promoted last season. There you go.
100%, yeah. I think Sky Sports did a really good article, actually, on possession from last year in the Championship. And what it was doing was looking at how long it took for each team in the league to move the ball back to front. So they have that data. They obviously have the Opta data. They can measure that. And Cardiff and I can't remember who else it was, but basically Cardiff moved the ball back to front quicker than anyone.
The time it took Aaron Gunnarsson to dry it on his shirt, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The time it took basically Sean
Morrison to get forward and Sol Bamba,
to lob it. Yeah, or Sol Bamba to lob it to the wing to Junior Hoylett. That is literally that, and that was their game plan. Yet they got promoted on it. So yeah, you're right. In the last few years, I don't think possession matters. I think we've moved beyond that. What we've moved to now is what do you do with the possession? You're quite right. Leeds, for example, they tend to have most of the possession, but they also create the most chances in the league. So, they clearly use that possession well. They dominate games, they drag you out of position, and then they go quick for the chance. Whereas Swansea, they're an interesting side, Swansea, actually. They keep the ball or complete more passes than most teams. But then they have this style where when they open up the gap, they try and go quick into the gaps. That's, again, on the converse to Derby, who started off the season with this possession-based style, and it went nowhere. I remember watching them early in the season just thinking they're not even trying to progress the ball through the lines. It was just possession for possession's sake. And that's the loop that teams got into, I think, after Spain a couple of years ago. We've now moved to a more, okay, I don't really care how long we have the ball. I mean, Sheffield United are 11th for possession in the league. We can keep the ball, but we're not really bothered. What we want to do is we want to create chances with it.
So was this all just a little bit blown out of proportion because there was a really good team with 4, all-time world-class players who were very good at it, and, it was more maybe about you have Messi and you have Xavi and you have Iniesta. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, spot on, exactly that. It's as with any stat is based on the team you're recording. That Barcelona team will probably never be replicated in terms of the quality and the management they had above, as we've seen since. And yeah, their possession, they can rotate the ball in midfield, going nowhere, and it doesn't look dangerous because they have a plan. I think a lot of teams who try and replicate that have obviously not got that quality, and you need to introduce that second phase, which is once the gap opens up, can we go through it? And that's really the key point. We've moved on from that in football now, so possession doesn't really matter. We now look at things, final third entries. How often do we get into the opposition final third? How often do we get in the opposition penalty box? And then once we're there, can we create chances from that? So it's all right being good at getting in the final third, but can we create from that? Can we actually create an opening? And how good is that opening as well? That's kind of the thought process now of an analyst.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant stuff. Let's look at some players. Most passes per game, but Ollie Norwood, number one. Liam Cooper, number two, and Matt Grimes from Swansea there.
Yep.
Pass completion, and do you ever have snotty moments like this where you decide, right, I'm going to decide whether anyone knows about football by asking them about Jack Grealish? Well, he's my one of those. So Jack Grealish, number one for pass completion. Jack Colback and Ursi Konsa. So you've got an attacking midfielder, a stopper midfielder, and a Brentford centre half, and then assists as well. And I'm sure you'll give me some stuff. Kamil Grosicki, Pablo Hernandez, who I know we both love, and Said Benrahma. What are assists worth? And talk to me about these final third completions and whatnot. Are assists now? Are we going to be pushing them over and saying we now know more?
They already have been.
Wow, okay.
So not as fans, and it is the Jack Grealish argument all over. I mean, I've had it today on Twitter myself with someone else who works in football data, and he's talking to me, and he's right. He's talking to me about goals and assists and output. What is the output? Where are the goals? Where are the assists on Jack Grealish, for example? And I get that argument. I really do. Because good players do in that position do contribute goals and assists. But in my head, and I think in a lot of other analysts' head now and at clubs, we're past assists. Because I'll give you a scenario. So you go on a mazy run, you beat 3 or 4 players, you're into the penalty box, you square the ball to your centre forward, who blazes it over the bar from about 6 yards out.
Yeah, I know what you're going to say.
Yep. So to the bare statistics of assists, you get absolutely no credit for that whatsoever. So if you do that over a season, admittedly, you're not going to do that over a season, but if you create chances through your delivery, your quality, your passing, and your strikers don't score because they're not the greatest conversion, you might only end up a season with 5 assists. Get the guy with 10.
Can I do the other example then? So
yeah, go on.
Jonas Knudsen, Ipswich left back.
Yeah.
Not a great passer. Plays the ball 5 yards square to Bersant Selena at QPR last year. He dribbles inside 2 players, smashes it in the top corner, and Jonas Knudsen, I think, had 7 assists or something scandalous like that. So is that where you're going with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the converse as well, like you say. An assist for me doesn't mean anything because it tells me nothing. It just tells me this was the guy who did the final action before a goal. Well, what does that mean? Yeah,
mind blown.
Exactly.
That's my mind blown moment for the pod.
Yeah, hopefully everyone's feeling the same up then. This is what I try and do. I think Sheffield. I'm so glad I'm a United fan, not because of United, but because of our fan base. So since I started doing the stats, I'm talking to guys in their 40s, 50s, the stereotypical Yorkshire blokes, really, who they know their football, they work hard, and whenever I mention anything about metrics, they just want to punch me, quite frankly. I'm just an idiot talking.
Where's Brian
stuff.
Dean?
Yeah, exactly that, mate. So it's interesting because I've actually got some of those guys now to understand, not that I'm right, but what I'm saying actually has some merit. And they do want to look deeper. So you mentioned key passes earlier. So admittedly, key passes are not the gold standard, but we move on from assists to key passes. So what a key pass tells us is it gives us an overall picture of who is creating a lot of chances because it's the pass that sets up a shot. Now, they're not all equal, admittedly, but it still gives us more information than an assist. So if we look at key passes for the league, I'm just doing it now, so ignore the look across to the laptop. the total. So if we look at totals, I won't break these down by minutes played or anything like that. That's something else. But if I was to say who's the number one key passer in the league, who do you think that name might be?
It'll be Hernandez or Buendia, surely.
Yeah, it's Hernandez by quite a long way.
Yeah.
Which meets your eye test, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Pablo Hernandez.
Best player I've seen this season, yeah.
Yeah, 100% agreed. In terms of his contribution to his team, I have no idea how he wasn't in kind of the EFL and others' team of the season. I get that that's a... Go on, mate. Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, I've said this numerous times on my content, I was at Villa Leeds 1-3-2, and for 20 minutes in the second half, it was like I was at the bloody ballet, honestly.
Yeah.
He was ridiculous. I get tingles even thinking about it, and I hope the other people in the stadium understood. You know when someone's constantly in space and the biorhythms are going and every first touch is perfect, and then they start doing your piss-takey Norwood floaty passes and they all come off. But it's like I know that the hot hand thing is supposed to be a fallacy in basketball, but he had a hot hand for 20 minutes there. Sorry, go ahead, keep up.
No, you're right. He just did the same to us. Even though we beat Leeds when we played him recently, the first 20 minutes was just majestic. He was unplayable. He was absolutely unplayable, and he is clearly. I mean, he's unbelievable. But so that's where you see. So you can see Pablo Hernandez. I mean, he's a good one because he's up there in assists anyway. But for example, the top three. I'll just do the top three for key passes. So Ollie Norwood is in there. He's second. Now Norwood actually gets his numbers bumped up by a lot of set pieces as well because he takes all our set pieces. I'll go into that in a bit. I break those down into what I call open play as well. Again, because I'm trying to give information about who might be good in future as well as who's good now. It's good to take out set pieces because set pieces aren't that replicable, if you see what I mean. I want to know who in open play can create chances because that's the hardest thing in football to do, right? Third is really good example because he's not at the top of the assist table. So who do you think third might be? Just give one name.
Give me the club. Go on.
I can't give you the club because it'll be obvious, but he's not in the top three.
Oh, Christ.
Any name.
But Bowen for Hull?
No, Barry Bannon.
Right, okay.
So you see, Barry Bannon isn't necessarily what you would think of as a directly creative player, is he, in terms of assists?
He's a deep-lying playmaker.
Exactly, but Sheffield Wednesday have a style where they're quite direct, especially under Steve Bruce now. And Bannon, their idea is to give Bannon the ball because he can thread through balls through exceptionally, better than most in the league. And he is third for creating chances in terms of the key passes. So you can see already the move from assist. It takes it away from the players who can set up goals. Assists are valid. We do look at them. But then you need to look at the totals behind that. It might not be Barry Bannon's fault that he's created 77 chances and they haven't scored all them goals from that. We can move further away from that, but again, I want to get into that in XG later on because people might want to stop listing from that because there's another metric behind it. But you can see the evolution, if you will.
Yeah, wow. And can you just have a quick word on Jaap Stam because that was the most interesting example of possession obsession and then falling off a cliff, right?
And also, again, I'm not a geek just for XG all the time, but a great example of expected goals being correct because Reading that season had...
Oh, it was insane, wasn't it?
Unreal amounts of passes completed, unreal amounts of possession, and didn't do too much with it. And their kind of underlying numbers, their chance creation numbers, their expected goal numbers were really low. And there's no way they should have made where they did. But they did because football doesn't always go with the stats. It isn't that game. It isn't baseball. It's more fluid than that. And people always say to me when it's more fluid, you see, your XG is wrong. Then we look the next season and Reading reverted to type. They reverted to what the numbers said they should have performed like and just escaped relegation because they played in the same way but weren't as lucky, quite frankly. That was never going to be sustainable. They hardly ever progressed the ball to key areas. I'm sure their fans would disagree. And I don't want to...
Jay, I don't think they do. I don't think they do disagree. I think they're with you.
No, I mean, I watch a lot of football. So for any fans who think I don't watch your team, not only do I watch the highlight shows, I have a software account. I watch Championship and League One football, not only extended highlights, I watch games as well. I've watched a lot of Reading this season under Gomez, their new manager, which is kind of going the same way. But it's there is a time and a place where possession-based football just has no effect. And if you're not going to change that, there's one way that's going.
Very interesting. Just quickly before we get to XG, whilst Pep was at Barca, we then got the rise of Jurgen Klopp and counter pressing and two German titles in 2011, 2012 Champions League final, and this production line of amazing players going off. Are we anywhere close with pressing? Bugs me actually because when people I'm a big fan of Bielsa, and when people don't know anything about Bielsa, high press, and it feels like
No.
they're just trotting it
Yeah.
out. Are we any closer to metrics to prove good running and good pressing?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, we're there. There is a bit of metric around for years, actually. Again, people can look into this in their own time, but it's called PPDA. And what that stands for is passes allowed per defensive action.
Not public
Simple as
display
that.
of affection.
No, definitely
No.
not.
Say it again. Sorry, I ruined that completely.
No. PPDA. But you're quite right, because I've got an admiration for Bielsa that's probably unhealthy, quite frankly. But especially as a Blade, I shouldn't really like a Leeds manager that much, but I love him. So, yeah, in essence, what this manages or looks to cover, if you will, is it looks to count how many passes each team allows before they do a tackle, an interception, or a challenge. A duel. We call it a duel in the stats world. In essence, a loose ball that you might compete for is what a real fan who doesn't like the stats might see it as. Now, this metric's been around for a couple of years. It's been refined over the time. Where we've got to now is we record that, but only for the opposition half or only for the opposition final third, which is really what pressing is, isn't it? If you're in your own half, that's not really pressing. That's just
But what
defending.
about Jay? What about someone like Rotherham who'll stand off, but then in the middle third will trigger and press the hell out of you to try and win free kicks in the middle area? Their number would be low, although I would say Rotherham are good at pressing.
I agree with you. That's where that metric doesn't stand up that well. I was just going to come on to that. As with any metric, there is Sheffield United are the same. So we will press in the first instance, but if we don't win that first phase, we drop right off into a low to mid block because that's our shape. And it's team dependent upon shape, of course it is. There is a company out there called StatsBomb, who some of your guys who watch your stuff, who know the data side, may follow. They're a private company, but they do post out a lot of EFL type stats. They are bespoke in their own nature. They actually record the press. So they literally record each player's actions of how many times they go and press the ball compared to standing off. And they're a brilliant company. They've got some great data, and Rotherham do come up better than they do in the other metrics. So that you made a great point. Obviously, you know your onions, as I say, Ben. But even on the PPDA, which is it's the best as public analysts we've got. We can only go on what we've got because I'm not going to spend thousands of pounds on getting data. I love my Twitter followers, but not that much. And Leeds are at the top of that metric, which goes to show. Derby is second, and I actually agree. I think Derby. Yeah, no, and I actually agree with this. When they had Mount, I remember watching Derby, especially. I mean, it was a cup game, but when they played away at Chelsea in the cup game, and I remember watching them thinking that is brave. They pressed high. Mount, Wilson. They had a very Marriott as well. They had a very mobile front four, and because of that, they were able to get after the opposition. But you're quite right. Once you got past that breaking line, what happened then? And that's the key indicator. It's all right looking at the numbers, but you need to put that in context with performance, I think, and a team style. And that's where it's all right. Leeds being sat at the top. We all know what they do. But there's other teams that are sat at the bottom. Needless to say, Ipswich are high in the pressing metric. Yeah, exactly.
No comment.
That might be more running around like headless chickens than organised. I know,
yeah,
right. But it's not refined yet. It's not perfect, but there is ways to look at it.
And then Mr. Klopp is going to say, but it's not how intensely we press. It's when we press as well, and then it'll be it's incredible, isn't it? Because there's a guy I do my podcast with, Dave, who your eye test, he's brilliant at it, and it really annoys me because I want him to be wrong a lot of the time, and he'll tell me something about a player after watching him for 5 minutes, like his body language or how he kicks the ball, and he's normally right, and it's just getting the numbers to match up with the eye test, isn't it? Right, look, let's get on to XG. You've kind of explained it to begin with. So I had a look at the XG table on Infogol, and just before we do this, as a statistician, are you more interested in when the stats are completely bonkers wrong than when they're bang on?
Both. Both. So I love when XG. I love when a fan base hates XG because what XG says. Because at that moment they might feel it's something different, and then in 6 months' time, when they've dropped down the league by 10 places, I love it when they come back and when you might have been right. And then I do love the converse. I do love when someone's just an outlier, and you just think, how? How? We need to study this team to see how the hell they've done this. But I think, yeah, well, I mean, we'll get into definition there. I think expected goals always needs context, as all stats do. It is not godlike. It is not going to tell you 100% what's going to happen. But the more data it has, so the more seasons you look at XG of a team, the better predictor it is of where that team is at. So one season XG is never going to be the greatest indicator, but it does give you a good view of what's happening. I've got, now, like you say, you've got you've got the info goal table.
So yeah, there were 4 teams on par, which quite boringly include Ipswich and Sheffield United. So our 2 teams apparently are exactly where they should be based on their performance, and so are Swansea and Blackburn. Let's look at the teams who are exceeding their XG, and I've just gone for the 3 biggest outliers for you. And actually, what might be fun is for me to try and explain and for you to tell me why I'm wrong.
Go on, yeah, play that game.
So apparently Sheffield Wednesday are 9 places above where they should be. Surely this is down to a managerial change, isn't it? That they were really bad under one manager and then a lot better under the other. And
yeah,
the stats haven't caught up yet.
Yeah, they were terrible under Lahukai. Again, it's context. So I've got good friends who do Sheffield Wednesday stats, and if you look at the metrics since Bruce has been in charge, they're actually in the top 4.
Yeah. Okay.
So it just hasn't caught up yet.
No. One that surprised me is Preston, because I saw Preston a few weeks ago. Preston apparently 10 places above where they should be, and Pearson and Gallagher use the ball well. Brown is like nearly a second striker. They seem very energetic. They seem to lack a Timu Puki or a Billy Sharp, a finisher guy, but they've got this big guy Stockley up front, kind of as some muscle. I am going to hand that over to you because I thought they were well worth their position.
So I know the guys that do the info goal model, and they're very clever people. I have a different XG table. I'm not promoting myself, but actually it's interesting because my model has Preston high.
Okay. What's different from your model to theirs then that would have them higher up?
I don't know the difference, as in the specific difference, because it's obviously their company. They use it for betting, so it's proprietary. I wouldn't ask. But every model will be different because it matters how many shots the model's based on, what factors, as we spoke about, what factors is the model based on. So as you gave the right example with the Van Basten volley, they might judge that as a higher or lower XG chance than mine. And if you think about that multiplied by 1,000 for all the different shots that happen, that'll obviously make a big difference. This is where XG needs context. I have my own negatives about expected goals. As much as I'll tweet out charts and stats about it, it's just information. It shouldn't be taken as religion as such, if you will, because it's all based on where the information's coming from and what it's based on. I don't want to get too nerdy about that, but it's a pinch of salt type thing. You can look at it and you can understand it and you can think that's okay. And you can also look at it and say, I'm going to wait to see how that plays out a little bit because that looks like too much of an outlier.
Yeah.
So when Preston were in 18th, I tweeted out an XG table that had them in 8th, and I had them about 2 points outside the playoffs. I don't use my XG model for betting personally. I do on the odd occasion if I have a pound accumulator or whatever, but I don't do it for betting. However, I know some guys who follow me did use it for betting and won quite a bit of money because for the next 10 weeks, Preston are unbeaten. And that's what XG can do. It can predict performance. So although they have Preston lower down, I have them quite high up, even when they were low in the table. And that was based on the chances they create and concede. So just to reconfirm Opta's definition of XG, which is probably a little bit clearer than my blabberings on, if you will. XG is the measure of the quality of a shot based on several variables, such as shot angle, distance from goal, and whether it was defined as a big chance or not. So there's a very simple explanation. We don't need to go in all the variables of it, but it basically just gives you a value of how often that shot goes in the goal based on a number of shots that's been watched.
Okay, so one word answer then, Jay. Preston are 7th?
Yes,
Up or down?
they're going to make the playoffs in my eyes.
So they're going up from 7th. Interesting. And then our favourites in this one, Derby, apparently 12 places above, should be 20th according to Info Goal. Have they been bailed out by some good individuals? Is that the
100%. And this is where me and Infogol do agree completely. Although I am slightly higher in terms of not being that low. But so what that shows is that Derby's ability to not only score goals from situations that are low percentage. That's what us in the analyst corner would call it. Basically, that they've scored low percentage goals, if you will. So shots from outside the box, from miles out, from free kicks as well. They're always low percentage. They've also won points because of those shots that they probably shouldn't have. So it's had the double effect, if you will. So if you imagine Harry Wilson scoring a goal from 45 yards and that wins them 3 points, Harry Wilson probably shouldn't have scored that goal in terms of the average. And also they've won 3 points where they probably shouldn't have. There was a game against Preston on Sky a few weeks ago when they actually drew 0-0.
Oh, was that the game?
Yeah, I remember you saying on your pod. What did you? Okay, this will be an interesting acid test, I guess. What would you say about the game? So, did anyone deserve to win? Who created more chances?
It was a 0-0, so I'm reaching here, but
Yeah.
I remember, I believe Derby hit the post twice with low XG chances, and then Preston, they made a tactical switch. They put Gallagher from centre to right, and
Yeah.
they probably, because of it being what it is, a game goes from start to finish. You'd probably would have said Preston should have won in the end.
Yeah, that's fair. I agree with you. That was my eye test as well. The XG of that game was really interesting. As you say, you hit again, and this is what I'm a fan. I love sitting in a pub talking absolute nonsense about football, and I can do it all day, as probably people recognise it. But I watched that game, and I thought to myself, 4 or 5 years ago, I would have thought, do you know what? Derby probably should have won that. Maybe a draw at best because they hit the post twice, right? That's good, isn't it? Their XG for that game was 0.23.
There you go. Right.
Preston's was 1.89.
Ouch.
So that's, for anyone who doesn't know what that means, it's the total accumulation of their chances that they've created, the values. Don't particularly worry about the decimal point nonsense. In essence, it just means that Preston created a lot more and a lot more high quality chances than Derby.
Worry about the distance between the two numbers, yeah?
Exactly. Preston should have won that game based on chances created and conceded alone. And that's what analysts have become interested in. The bit between it is important because it's how you get to the chances. But what chances do we create compared to what chances do we concede? And Preston should have absolutely dominated that game. And that is not the first time that that's happened to Derby.
Interesting. Very interesting. 11 teams underperform their XG. And I think we're off to Griffin Park again in a minute, Jay. But so I'll try my best to give it's quite a fun game. My garbled explanation. You can tell me why I'm wrong. Brentford, I'll let you answer. QPR, apparently 8 places down. Surely they have a good manager and players not good enough to be able to do what he's asking them to do. Would that be right with QPR?
Not quite. Not for XG. No? Not quite. Always bear in mind, again, and I'm not teaching you how to suck eggs, but always bear in mind with XG that it is based on actual events. So it's based on actual shots taken, actual shots conceded. So it isn't an underlying tactical thing, if you see what I mean. Okay. This is what are they creating and what are they conceding. So you say QPR are underperforming.
By 8 places.
So what that tells you is not necessarily the strikers, although it is. In QPR's case, they have actually created better chances and they haven't taken their chances. Or the converse, defensively, their defence have been allowing goals to go in.
There's been a lot of late goals, actually, in their games. So it could even be a concentration thing at the end of games, couldn't it?
100%. But again, because it's the XG, it means that somewhere along the way, and I don't have the table in front of me, so I can't explain which side of it, but somewhere along the way, they are either creating chances and not taking them, or they're conceding goals from areas where they ordinarily wouldn't be. Okay. I'll just pull up my data, if you will, just for QPR.
Go ahead.
Okay, so QPR not that bad. So on the expected goals, I have QPR. Their total expected goals total for the season is 48.7, and they've scored 45. So they're slightly underperforming what the averages would say they should have scored. And then we have their expected goals against, which is the defensive metric, if you will, the defensive side of that. There we go. So we've hit the difference.
Okay.
QPR should have conceded about 49.9 goals. I know you can't concede 0.9 of a goal. I understand that. But somewhere between 49 and 50 goals, if you will, for their layman's terms. They've actually conceded 59. So they've conceded 9 to 10 goals more than what the expectation would be. Now, the first thing you do as an analyst when you look at that is probably look at the goalkeeper.
He's quite good. It's Lumley, isn't it?
I like Joe Lumley. He's quite a good goalkeeper. So what that's telling me is somewhere along the way, the defence is letting low XG chances become shots on target.
Right, okay.
So that's the way an analyst looks at that and interprets that data. So it's not necessarily that the goalkeeper's causing the problems. It's that the defence are allowing shots from low XG areas. And this actually happened to Sheffield United last year. And now I think we would be considered a good defensive team. I think that's fair to say.
7 clean sheets on the trot, yeah.
Yeah, only Borough have conceded less. But we were actually in the same position. At the end of last season, we conceded 10 more goals than our XG said we should have. So me and Ben were on the podcast and we were looking at a goalkeeper. Well, we had Jamal Blackman for a long time last season. Good keeper.
Yeah.
We had Jack O'Connell still, Richard Stearman, who's, good defenders. Basham still playing at right centre-back. So don't want to make it United-based, but we were kind of perplexed almost. And what I said to Ben was, I think you should study this next year. I'm going to make an assumption now that will change. And if we keep the same defence and have the same kind of defensive setup in its effectiveness, we'll actually concede a hell of a lot less.
But you've improved 2 of the positions with Henderson and Egan, right?
Agreed. But we have the same kind of XG data against. We're not conceding any different type chances. We're just better at defending them, if you will. So we're probably allowing less shots from low percentage areas to go on target. So maybe QPR could press more, go and win the ball more, maybe stop those shots, and maybe that'll stop their XG. Or they just continue what they're doing and let the numbers revert to the mean, as we say.
Interesting. So here we go then. Why aren't Brentford top of the league? And my guess would be that they play a lovely, lovely model of football with players who are not elite, and that would be why? I don't know. Why aren't Brentford in the top 6?
I reckon Thomas Frank would like us both to answer this, because I bet he's just thinking why. It's a good question.
And it's Jay, it's consistent. Were their XG stats good last year?
Amazing.
Yeah, there you go.
Amazing. This is why, again, I refer to the guys because I like the guys, just like I watch your stuff. I like not the top 20 guys. They do their season predictions, and it's why they predicted Brentford to come in the top 3. Or the top 6, because they went on evidence, basically. They went on the data of the last few seasons. So Brentford, let's break down what they do. So their chance creation, if you will, their expected goals, what do they create going forward? They should have scored around about 54.2 goals on my XG model. That has them about 7th or 8th highest in the league, right? They've actually scored 60. So they're overperforming their expected goals.
Okay.
So what that means is their finishing has actually been better than it should have been. They've scored from chances that ordinarily they wouldn't have. Their expected goals against is the converse. It's kind of like the QPR. They've conceded more than they should. I won't just quote numbers because I know people go to sleep. But they're like QPR. They've conceded more than they should have. And I know from my eye test, because I've watched a lot of Brentford this season, they've had moments where defensively they've been quite poor, and they've allowed good chances from poor defensive errors rather than anything structurally. And I know Thomas Frank changed to a 3-4-3, and since that time they've had better results and they look like they were trending upwards, and they've had a bit of a fall off. But there's always a thing with Brentford of why. Their data has them as a top 8 team. Why are they not there? And quite frankly, they should just regress to that mean. They're really interesting.
Jay, is there nothing to say that one is the consequence of the other? I.e., if you split your centre halves and your fullbacks are forward and you're constantly trying to pass, that you will, by definition, concede more high quality chances.
100%, yeah, 100%. It's a risky style, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're gonna those fullbacks, those wing backs push on. But weird because, again, it's down to how you do the structure. Because, again, I'm going to revert back to United, I guess, because we have a similar structure in a way, 3-4-2-1. Our wing-backs are quite famous at the minute in the league. We push them on, I think that's fair to say. Yet we don't concede a lot of high chances. And I think it comes down to how do we work the ball out from the back compared to Brentford. Like you say, Brentford split centre-halves. Concert passes a lot. Metham, when he was there, passed a lot. Janvier is a little different. He's actually a bit more of a solid centre-half, and I think that's helped them. And I also think experience plays into that. So they had two good young centre-halves, but were they that good positionally? No, not really. They didn't really have the solidness, the solidness, I don't think. I think we went down there really in the season and won 3-2, and it was a game where Brentford came back into it. It was 2-2 for a long time. But as soon as we switched the gear and started creating again, they just fell to pieces. And I think they're good centre-halves, but they just come unstuck under pressure. And it's those one or two moments of pressure that have basically done them for the season.
Interesting. So before I talk about Ipswich, where would you recommend people look for their XG data then? Apart from obviously following @Blades Analytic on Twitter.
Yeah, self-promotion. Now, Infogol are fantastic, I must say. It's just a reference point, but Infogol are a private company, but they openly get out their data. You know, they tweet it out. You can go and get it on their website. It's free to access. So I've got to give them props and big credit, really, because they're fantastic at it. I do my best to tweet out as much as I can. So, yeah, Blades Analytic, I try and tweet out a lot of XG data. There's other analysts, Gareth Cooper is an analyst who's been picked up from Twitter and now works for a club in the EFL, @Gareth Cooper. He tweets out XG tables. I don't think anyone should ever take this as read. I'm an analyst and I don't. There's more to it. There's more nuance to that, as you can see with Brentford, and there's teams who are good on the data who aren't good in the league, and there's reasons for that. It's not just because the data's wrong or right. But I think it's a good, if people are interested, it's good reference point. I'm happy for anyone to ask me questions, certainly, on what does it mean? Why are their team here? Why are their team there in an XG table? Why is it relevant? Why is the league table not important? It is. I'm a United fan. We're second. It's definitely important at this stage of the season. But there's more to the league table. That's what I would say.
Interesting. And just with my Ipswich hat on, because obviously we've had like the worst year ever. But moreover, we've had the indignity of people looking from the outside at Mr. McCarthy leaving and putting 2 and 2 together and making 850. So I know, and you've had Kieran Maguire on your show as well.
Yeah.
I suspect you and Kieran together, using some numbers, could completely debunk all of that to say, look, this spend against everything else over 17 years will, in the end in relegation. And it's so obvious when you talk about XG. Ipswich last season finished 14th. I'm sure, I don't know if you've got data, I'm sure that was above probably where it should have been. And their goalkeeper played very well. They had a manager in the dugout who was very, very good at spotting holes and filling them in game. And they had Martin Waghorn, who was very good at set plays and finishing. And the goalkeeper went off a cliff, the manager left, and Waghorn went to Derby.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, give you a bit of data behind it, because obviously that's what I do. So last year, Ipswich had the second lowest expected goals total in the league. They were only behind Burton Albion. Okay. Your expected goals total was 44.8 and you scored 57 goals.
Waghorn.
Yep. So you overperformed your expected goals by 13 goals. That alarm bells. So I'm not saying Ipswich don't, because all clubs do look at this now, but alarm bells should have been ringing.
Well, especially when you say you overperformed your goals by, it's a huge percentage, but 13, and Waghorn scored 16 and assisted 13 or something ridiculous.
And then you
direct
lose
hand in 39 goals, and you sell 29 goals, and you sell that player.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. And it's not easy to replace. I understand that, especially when the purse strings are tight. But the indicators were there very early on last season that the performance last season was never going to be replicated at all, especially because I know Hurst spent some money from the Waghorn money, and I get that. But it was never going to be replicated. It was always going to be lower. The question was, could you do anything to stop that drop? And no, quite frankly, I haven't. I mean, look at Ipswich this season, just to finish up on. There in a second, just load up my page.
Well, it was bang on. They were one of the 4 teams that were exactly where they should be.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Ipswich this season are bottom of the league for expected goals created. This is just created, so it's just attacking stats. you have created enough for 32.2 expected goals and you've only scored 30. So not only have you created the lowest total in the league, you've actually underperformed that total as well, which I think goes a long way to talk about your current crop of strikers.
And at that point, the battery on Jay's phone went. But I hope you enjoyed what we did get done. I will be sure to have Jay back on. Did still have a few more questions to do, but hopefully you enjoyed what we got through. Thank you very much, and goodbye.